Regardless of the language or technology, whether that be C, Python, Rust, Node, Flutter, React, or anything else out there, you're always going to see a couple of different groups. You have the experienced developers who understand the merits of their tool, but they can also see the flaws in it and understand when it isn't the right tool for the job. You have the new and the learning developers who are interested in their new tool. They can compare it to other things they know, but maybe not in a super in-depth way, but they'll also try to use it on every sort of project they can work on. Like, for example, when I first started learning React, every website I built became a React website, even if it just wasn't needed whatsoever. But there's one more group that sort of overlaps with both of these. And that is the language or technology zealots who are obsessed with their tool and think that anything else is worse, and any solutions that came out after their tool just are not worth looking at whatsoever. It is the best tool for every single use case, and even if something else does address the problem as well, all of the merits of their language outweigh any possible issues it could ever have. And these language or technology zealots are some of the least useful people in the entire technology world. Now, this isn't limited to any single language. You'll see these people in C, in Python, in React, in Flutter, in Rust, and anything else, but one place that I've seen it very commonly in my comment section is with C and Rust. Now, no one seems to say anything when I mention C, but the second that I mention Rust, whether that be in the context of some random GitHub project being written in Rust, or Rust being in the news because a project like the Linux kernel decides that they may potentially adopt it as a way to write modules in, without fail, there is going to be an argument about C and Rust in the comment section, and that liking Rust makes you a bad person. It has no merits over C, and C can just never be replaced, and if you write Rust code, you're just a bad developer. And these sorts of discussions, I don't think really help anyone. Both of these languages exist for a reason. They were both created because the developers of the language saw the existing solutions that were around and decided that none of those were going to be appropriate for the task they wanted to perform, and thus they created a language. C has a faster compiler, it has better tooling, it has more library, it has better documentation. If you want to argue that that's not the case, then you're absolutely out of your mind. C has just had more years to develop these things. But in some projects, trading all of that for memory safety and a bit of a performance hit could actually make a lot of sense. Will it make sense on every single project? Absolutely not. But there are some projects out there where writing it in C is just not the best solution. And a zealot is someone who just won't acknowledge this very, very simple fact that the tool that they like, in this case C and Rust, are not perfect, and in some cases are just not the best tool for the job. Does this mean that those languages are bad languages? Absolutely not, but you have to be willing to judge what you're working on a case-by-case basis. And I just want to put this meme to bed that C will never be replaced, because C will be replaced, and it already has been replaced multiple times by newer iterations of C. Computer science hasn't been perfected, and over time we realized that some of the assumptions we held in the past may not actually hold true for future systems, and we address our tools as we actually go. One day C may not hold its spot as a systems language, and that's okay. It may still have some use, but something better that isn't related to C whatsoever may come along. Whether that tool already exists is a whole nother story. Now, I'm definitely not trying to say that you shouldn't be a fan of something or that being excited about something is bad, because when I first heard about things like React and Angular and all of these other web frameworks, they completely blew my mind, because before that point, I was just building web pages with things like HTML, writing it out by hand, or doing everything on the back end with things like .NET. And having this way you could very easily generate a page in JavaScript, that was a completely different way of working, and I absolutely loved it. Now, someone's going to bully me in the comment section for that, but I still kind of do like web frameworks. And even though I thought these tools were absolutely amazing, I kind of knew in the back of my head that something new might pop up. It might be better, it might be worse, but I should try out that new tool, look at how it's used, and then see if it actually makes sense for a project I want to work with, rather than just being attached to this one tool and not accepting anything else. Because of how quickly web dev moves, I can't imagine there being that many zealots attached to any specific technology, but What I do know exists are the Zealots who are just attached to running forward as quickly as possible. Doesn't matter how unstable the technology is, it's the newest thing, it's the coolest thing, everything should be built with it until next week when there's another cool thing, and now everything should be scrapped and we should be working with that one instead. The idea of chasing progress for the sake of progress is basically the same thing as what we've been talking about before. This doesn't mean that we shouldn't be moving forward, but what we should be doing is slowly moving forward as we know the technologies that we're working with are actually ready for production. If some people want to go and test new things, that's all well and good, but there comes a point where you need to worry about stability rather than the newest, coolest features. We know there are language zealots and technology zealots, but another kind of zealot is a programming paradigm zealot, and a technology a lot of people love to hate is OOP. Object-oriented programming, which has its fair share of problems, which I could probably dedicate an entire video to, like the hundreds of other people have already done so, but what you'll see in a lot of these videos is they typically ignore why OOP is widely used. Wider languages like C# and Java have tons of corporate usage because they don't just pick a language out of thin air, there is a reason why. One is these languages are very easy to test because you can take your object and test it separately from everything else. Because you're building everything in classes, this is a natural way to separate out workloads, so it's easy for management to actually assign work to different people without having others actually step over each other. And because basically everyone who comes out of the university system has some form of object-oriented training, you basically have infinite developers, and these things may not be valued for an open source project where you don't have things like a time constraint or you have clients, and things like performance may actually be what you prioritize. And along the same lines, this is why a lot of things basically just exist as a web app. So take Discord, for example. You make the web version of Discord, and if you want to make the desktop version of Discord, it's the exact same thing, just put inside of Electron, basically halving your workload, saving corporate tons and tons of money. I said you don't have to be excited for everything, but you also just don't have to like everything either. I don't like things like the older version of Angular, which is AngularJS. I don't like Bootstrap or Java, and I prefer to avoid ever working with these, but if I come across an app or a site that's using these, I judge it on its merits, not on the preconceived ideas I have about its technology. Every technology out there has some form of use case, even if the language was just made entirely for the sake of a meme like whitespace, where everything in the language is a space, a tab, or a line break. Even something like this has a use case. This is just to see if it can be done, and because it's kind of funny. But if you look at more serious projects, even if you can't see a use case for Ruby or Python, some other project might look at that language and say, okay, this addresses this problem we're having and this problem we're having. This is actually the best tool for the job. Yes, there'll be drawbacks for going with that tool, but you have to decide whether the merits that you're getting alongside of that outweigh those drawbacks and what provides the best value for what you're trying to do. Ultimately, there is no silver bullet that's going to address every project out there. And I know this video isn't going to change anyone's opinion. The people who are obsessed with C or obsessed with Rust or anything else out there are still going to be obsessed with those tools. And I know I'm going to get comments telling me that Rust has no merits whatsoever and I'm a bad person for potentially maybe liking it, even though I didn't say I liked it whatsoever. I don't really care. This video goes out to the sane people out there, and even if everyone around you seems like a zealot, just keep in mind that there are some other sane people out there who are willing to judge things on their merits. So let me know what you think about this in the comment section down below. I think that's going to be everything for me, but before I go, I would like to thank my supporters. So a special thank you to Joachim, Donald, Michael, Andrew, Nathan, David, Will, Brennan, Chico Bento, Jamie, Joseph, Josh, Mitchell, Peter D, Stephen, Theru, Tony, Tushar, and all of my $2 supporters. If you'd like to go support my work, the links down below to my Patreon, subscribe side, leave a all that sort of stuff. I've got my podcast, Tech Over Tea, available basically anywhere. If you'd like to watch my content on a platform that isn't YouTube, it is currently available over on Odyssey. And I think that's pretty much everything for me, and I'm out.